What images come to your mind when you hear the word aliens? Perhaps one of these? Of course, those shown are film and television formats from our recent past, and they are certainly scary. But this is precisely the alien prototype that the mainstream still mainly proposes to us today. Let's try to clarify things a bit, and finally give an answer to one of the oldest questions of all time. Are we alone in the universe? To answer the question at the beginning of the video, obviously not much research is needed because logic would suffice. With an estimated over 2 trillion galaxies in our universe and 6 billion potentially habitable planets in our Milky Way alone, the answer, we believe, is obvious and indisputable. What has always been disputed by everyone, however, could be summed up in the famous exclamation made in 1950 in the canteen of the Los Alamos laboratories by Enrico Fermi,
where is everybody?
and which has remained in history under the name of Fermi's paradox. And, by various reasonings, by statistical calculation, as seen in the video on the origin of man, to the enormous distances between planets and galaxies, and to our inability to communicate and understanding of possible alien signals, make it a sensible exclamation at first sight. We, however, consider it ridiculous, as well as a child of ignorance, because it doesn't take everything else into account at all. Even just considering the stories that have been lost over the millennia and coming from the writings of every religion, as well as from the accounts of the most ancient peoples, and by those that still inhabit our planet today, the fact that we are visited by other extraterrestrial civilizations should, by now, be a fact well established in our culture. But some pseudo-scientific spokesmen judge such tales, rock engravings, and archaeological findings as mere representations. Simple invented stories and too ancient testimonies that cannot be seen or interpreted with today's eyes, even going so far as to speak of visual pareidolia. Thus, with such reasoning, one could say everything and its opposite, accepting some historical accounts as true while considering others as mere allegories or fabrications. Honestly, we don't quite understand what scientific basis or logical reasoning these silly claims are based on. If someone were to see today, for example, beings with 3 fingers and wanted to leave a testimony to posterity, however it may be denied in the drawing, will actually draw them with 3 fingers. Remember this detail. But if we continue to give credence to these gentlemen who abuse this way of reasoning, these tales will never be given their proper value, cutting short completely an entire historical as well as scientific heritage on various archaeological discoveries and sightings, and an important part of our history that tells of our nature and our origins. The funny thing is that facts that are deemed as unreliable are dismissed using unreliable reasons. But we know well that the tendency of such people is to deny and, where possible, hide anything that might refer to extraterrestrial civilizations. And honestly, we don't understand why. Or maybe we do. In 2023, in fact, during a discussion at the World Economic Forum, the founder Klaus Schwab pointed out that the arrival of an advanced extraterrestrial civilization could disrupt global economic and global politics, undermining the power system and causing global uncertainties. And this explains why various governments, especially the American one, tend to downplay the various sightings of unidentified objects in our skies, calling them simple hallucinations, individual or mass, or considering eyewitnesses as ignorant people who do not know or understand what they saw, despite the existence of photos and videos. For goodness sake, even if out of over 5 million total sightings, approximately 800,000 were confirmed as inexplicable, the fact would remain because, even if only one were considered true, or even just inexplicable, damn, it would mean that everything we've been told up until now is pure falsehood and lies. The US Department of Defense for All-Domain Anomaly Resolution, AARO, in a report dated February 2024, stated,
AARO recognizes that many people sincerely hold versions of these beliefs which are based on their perception of past experiences, the experiences of others whom they trust, or media and online outlets they believe to be sources of credible and verifiable information. The proliferation of television programs, books, movies, and the vast amount of internet and social media content centered on UAP-related topics most likely has influenced the public conversation on this topic and reinforced these beliefs within some sections of the population.
They're basically telling us that anyone who claims to have seen a UFO, a UAP, and maybe even filmed it, is gullible. Too bad that only 7 months later, on November 13th, 2024, a historic hearing was held at the US House of Representatives in Washington on the unidentified anomalous phenomena, now referred to as UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, or unidentified anomalous phenomena, followed in the footsteps of a similar one held in July 2023. In these hearings, key figures were interviewed under oath for their past roles at the governmental, military, and institutional levels. For the sake of brevity, we will avoid listing their names. These figures stated that the United States are in possession of biological evidence and remains of alien bodies, as well as materials and even whole flying saucers, that would prove the existence of extraterrestrial intelligences far superior to our own that have been regularly visiting our planet for at least decades. Pilots and aeronautical officers have testified that they have seen objects in flight that could not be compared to any other known aircraft because of their speed, shape, and maneuverability. We now offer just a few excerpts from these hearings.
Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise your right hands. This is where it gets real. Do you solemnly swear to affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Let me be clear. UAP are real. Advanced technologies not made by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe. Furthermore, the U.S. is in possession of UAP technologies, as are some of our adversaries. I believe we are in the midst of a multi-decade secretive arms race, one funded by misallocated taxpayer dollars and hidden from our elected representatives and oversight bodies. For many years, I was entrusted with protecting some of our nation's most sensitive programs. In my last position, I managed a special access program on behalf of the White House and the National Security Council. Excessive secrecy has led to grave misdeeds against loyal civil servants, military personnel, and the public, all to hide the fact that we are not alone in the cosmos.
The government has for decades denied any interest in UFOs, he told me, but the documents that he has assembled show that behind the scenes it was a completely different story.
If these technologies are not made by any government, who's making them? Private companies, or are you implying they are crafted by a non-human intelligence?
Well, ma'am, that's precisely why we're here. The problem is that, temporally speaking, over decades, not just the last 10 years, before, to put this in perspective, when
are these private companies you're implying, or is this non-human intelligence?
It may be both.
Okay. Has the government conducted secret UAP crash retrieval programs, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Were they designed to identify and reverse engineer alien craft, yes or no?
Yes.
I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program.
This is for any one of you. Based off of each of your experiences and observations, do you believe UAPs pose a potential threat to our national security?
Yes, and here's why. The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had, and you could put that anywhere. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work, you're talking something that can go into space, go someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants, and leave, and there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing.
Mr. Grush, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General, and some of which to the Intelligence Committee.
Mr. Graves, again, I'd like to know, how do you know that these were not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's zero airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach, and they would do so in very erratic and quick behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
Okay. Mr. Favor, what astonished you the most about the flight capabilities of these Tic Tac, very briefly?
The performance, absolute performance. It was.
And you're not aware of any other objects that anybody in the world has, in this world, that has those capabilities?
No, I think it's far beyond actually our material science that we currently possess.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
We believe that these statements should be sufficient to say that we have been visited, at least for several decades, by non-human intelligences and not of this planet. And what if such visits had been happening since ancient times? In fact, there are written testimonies, depictions, sculptures, etc. that have come down to the present day. And so, we can already draw two conclusions. These beings have been visiting us for millennia, and they are not evil. Also because if they were, they would have already subjugated or destroyed us when we still had spears and arrows. And, if we consider that, in most cases, they are associated with religions, we could very well define them, as we have already seen, as angels. But let's look at some of these writings and archaeological discoveries that bear witness to all this. Let's start with some lesser-known passages of the Bible.
I looked, and behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, a great cloud and a flash of fire, with brightness all around it, and in the midst of it was something like the flashing of red, hot metal. Jesus said, "Have faith in God and have faith also in me. In my Father's house there are many mansions. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have that are not of this fold. I must lead them too." By day the Lord was before them, like a great cloud to show them the way, and by night like a bright fire to give them light, so they could travel day and night.
But we can also quote some passages from the Quran.
We come down from heaven only by the Lord's command. To him belongs what is before us, and behind us and what is in between. Our Lord does not forget. Knowledge is with God alone. I convey to you the message that was given to me. I perceive that you are an ignorant people. And behold, they saw a cloud crossing the sky, flying toward their valleys.
But we also find references to flying objects. that can even dive underwater, even in numerous Sanskrit texts, such as the Vedas and Puranas, and in some ancient Tibetan manuscripts that speak of pearls of light or objects that move rapidly in the sky. And we can find other references in many ancient chronicles. For example, in 343 BC in ancient Greece, a Greek general named Timoleon reportedly spotted a torch-shaped object in the sky, capable of guiding Greek ships to Sicily. But even around 440 in the work of Titus Livius, Ab Urbe Condita, there is a passage that says,
"A kind of ships that shone in the sky."
All this testifies that these ships have been plying our skies long before the birth of Jesus. But other testimonies come to us from even more remote times. Ancient cave paintings dating back to around 10,000 years ago have been discovered in Hoshangabad, India, in Chhattisgarh. Notice the shape of the head and eyes, but especially notice the toes. They're three-toed. Some might immediately think that this could be an artistic simplification. But if we look at the other painted figures, we can notice that they have 5 fingers, demonstrating that they knew very well how to represent what they saw. And looking carefully at those prehistoric frescoes, you can also see what today we might call spaceships flying above the heads of the painted characters. But many other findings demonstrate how ancient extraterrestrial visits to our planet are. And many others, unfortunately, are still locked away in the vaults of various museums. But, of course, the evidence doesn't end there. In addition to the thousands of testimonies, videos and photos from ordinary people, in addition to the testimonies of the military, various governments and secret services, and in addition to archaeological evidence, we also have scientific data. And it is precisely in this regard that we want to talk about our satellite, the Moon. Only few people know that most observatories around the world keep a list of what are called transient lunar phenomena, or TLP. To give you an idea, NASA, for example, has a list starting from 1540, a sign of the interest of that agency in these strange phenomena that occur on the lunar surface. Here are some of them, taken from various observatories.
Near the Aristarchus crater, a bright spot lasted 30 minutes.
A huge beam of light flashes intermittently in the shadowed part of the Moon. The phenomenon lasts a few minutes.
In the Aristarchus crater, a bright red light shines like a star. This phenomenon will repeat itself several times.
We observe the passage in front of the Moon of a very sharp, dark object, having the shape of an ellipse.
The lunar disk is crossed several times by a large number of bright globes.
From the lunar surface, objects of dazzling brilliance break away and head into space at great speed.
In the shadow of Aristarchus, a very bright pulsating glow of magnitude 8.0.
At the edge of the Kepler crater, a red glow can be observed.
In the Littrow crater, 7 white spots can be seen, arranged in the shape of the Greek letter gamma.
A dome-shaped structure in the Plato crater that had never been observed in hundreds of hours of observation.
A large white spot with a tail similar to that of a comet, extending eastward on the shore of Mare Crisium, confirmed by several other observers. The effect was seen for several nights and faded completely by June 20th.
But what does all this have to do with aliens? As we've seen, our satellite has always been under observation, and we should already know everything about it. But the incessant research that is still being done today, not only by the United States, but also by Russia, China, and lastly by Europe, tells us no. The most renowned science communicators tell you about these lunar phenomena, attributing them to gas eruptions, ionization phenomena, electrostatic levitation, optical reflections. But can we really believe these explanations? It is well known that in the lunar subsoil there are small amounts of gases, such as helium-3, although contained in minerals, and that in the atmosphere there are traces of neon, helium, and hydrogen. Some statistical studies, however, have shown that many of these phenomena occur more frequently in areas rich in thorium, a radioactive element whose decay chain produces radon gas. So, we could say that some of these phenomena are indeed due to gas eruptions, some certainly to optical reflections, and others to meteor impacts that create visible lights that, however, last only a fraction of a second. We would therefore exclude ionization from these causes, because on the lunar surface, the concentration of anyons, negatively charged ions, recently confirmed by the Chinese Chang'e 6 probe, is too low to generate any natural luminescence. But, as usual, there's something these people don't tell you, namely that there are TLPs that definitely have natural origins and TLPs that instead have other explanations. Sure, too many justify them by simply calling them optical anomalies. But this one, for example, does this really look like an optical anomaly to you? Notice how it moves? Obviously it can't be a probe. And how it always stays visible even when passing through shadowed areas. Now we'll see it better, thanks to a zoom and a small adjustment to the contrast. And this one instead? We already expect in the comments someone to write the usual justifications about what those objects could be that can cover the distance from the Earth to the Moon in just under 10 minutes. That is, satellites, like the famous Starlink, debris left in orbit by various space missions, some kind of optical effects, plasma bubbles, etc., etc. In short, simple objects that would be capable of traveling at more than 2 million kilometers per hour in space and more than 200,000 kilometers per hour in the atmosphere, without obviously disintegrating. One thing that many people ignore, for example, is that the Moon is not grey as it has always been shown to us, but actually appears like this. Because if we saw the same photos in color, we'd discover something they don't want us to discover. Such as that the Moon has vegetation, in addition to being inhabited, mostly underground, and used as a base for beings from other worlds on missions here on Earth. If you do some research, You will surely find photos of the moon altered by NASA, even in a rather grotesque way, immediately after the discovery by some researchers of, let's call them anomalies, which would suggest structures of some kind on the lunar surface. It is known, in fact, even from sources within NASA and various US defense departments, that many of these photos have been altered a priori, with rough cutting and pasting in past years, and with more careful copying and pasting in recent times to hide what should not be seen. But this is just one of the many aspects of the cover-up that has been underway for decades now. The truths we are telling you, for those who haven't yet understood, emerged thanks to the sacrifice of some people who dedicated their entire lives to spreading the messages received from those who call themselves brothers of the sky or celestial brothers, and coming from other planets and other dimensions. We are talking about the famous contactees, such as George Adamski, Howard Menger, Eugenio Siragusa, and to date, the stigmatized Giorgio Bongiovanni. People which claim that these beings not only exist, but have been visiting us for millennia and have bases on our moon, as well as on Earth and other planets in our solar system. The most skeptical will surely say they are crazy people who hear voices, or people with strong mania for prominence. It's a shame that their revelations, whether in the religious, scientific, or sociological international fields, have always proven true. Such as the one made by George Adamski in 1955, and subsequently by Howard Menger in 1956, and by Eugenio Siragusa, who in 1969 convincingly declared that there is water and oxygen in the lunar subsoil and also in the Martian one. This fact was scientifically demonstrated in 2009 with NASA's LCROSS missions, and later confirmed around 2018 by the Indian probe Chandrayaan-2, which found evidence of the presence of water and hydroxyl molecules on the lunar surface, but also more recently in 2020 by NASA with the SOFIA telescope, and by the Chinese probes Chang'e 5 and 6. But the messages received from the contactees certainly weren't limited to talking about extraterrestrials and UFOs, but also about the disastrous situation of our world from a spiritual point of view, and to warning us about the reckless use of atomic energy, an energy that, as we use it, is disruptive, that separates instead of uniting. And, in fact, Jesus said it clearly.
Man does not dare to separate what God has joined together.
And he certainly wasn't referring to the ongoing marriage, as the church foolishly suggests today, because this would reduce Jesus' teachings to mere occasional phrases rather than deeper and more far-reaching teachings. And Jesus, in fact, is clear on this.
This was not how God had intended it from the beginning.
Implying a broader meaning, and certainly not linked to mere marriage. And indeed, he was referring to many things. God united the body with the spirit, and the spirit with his path, just as it has also bound quarks together. Essentially, everything that man does to divide and disharmonize things is evil, including the splitting of the atom, murder, and divisions in a general sense. Words that therefore connect spirituality and science, like all of his teachings. But, speaking of spirituality, we would like to avoid talking in this video about religion and about all the seers, as the Catholic Church calls them, who have appeared over the past centuries. However, we cannot refrain, in our search for truth about extraterrestrial existence, from mentioning the revelations made during the apparitions of the Holy Mother, which have always come true, and some, still unfulfilled, would concern our very own time. Many will indeed have heard of the famous 3 secrets of Fatima, given by the Holy Virgin to the 3 little shepherds, Lucia dos Santos, Francisco Marto, e Jacinta Marto, starting on May 13, 1917. There would be much to tell about this event, but since it is not the purpose of the video, we would like to focus only on one message in particular, namely the famous 3rd secret of Fatima. The Church declared that this secret was completed with the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II, but the story is quite different. In fact, the 3rd secret, besides being misinterpreted, was only partially revealed by the Church, while a significant part was revealed by the German newspaper Neues Europa, which published it in 1963 after the Church repeatedly refused to obey the Holy Mother's requests. But there is a further part that was revealed by the newspaper Non Siamo Soli, and this is the incredible revelation that the Virgin makes to Lucia.
And at that time, cosmic beings will come from distant shores of the universe in the name of God.
Referring, so it is said, to the second half of the 20th century. Too bad that this period was misinterpreted, and therefore the secret is still valid. But this prophecy has not yet been revealed to the world by the Catholic Church out of pure selfishness, since it would profoundly undermine its stability. But already a certain Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli, who later became Pope John XXIII, made, at the age of 54, while he was titular Archbishop of Mesembria, the following prophecy.
The signs will become more and more numerous. The lights in the sky will be red, blue, green, fast. They will increase. Someone is coming from afar and wants to meet the men of the earth. Encounters have already taken place, but those who truly saw have remained silent.
And then, from the accounts of his personal secretary, Cardinal Loris Capovilla, put into writing 20 years after the Pope's death, it emerged that in July 1961, the Pope himself had an encounter with an extraterrestrial while walking accompanied by Cardinal Capovilla in the garden of Castel Gandolfo in Rome. An oval-shaped object, remember this detail, very bright with flashing blue and amber lights, flew over their heads and landed in the garden. A strange being came out of it, with an absolutely human form, but surrounded by a light that seemed to emanate from its body, and with ears a little larger than ours. The Pope had the chance to speak with the extraterrestrial brother, and on that occasion he was asked to warn the world about the danger of nuclear proliferation. And in fact, in 1962, he wrote the encyclical significantly entitled Pacem in Terris, Peace on Earth, which, among other things, revealed the Pope's deep concern about the nuclear arms race. But the Pope was not the only one to have various kinds of encounters with the brothers from space. There are in fact millions of sightings of unidentified objects, filmed or photographed in our skies, especially by ordinary people. But also radar sightings of vehicles traveling at incredible speeds in our atmosphere, which then suddenly disappear. Objects that cannot be shot down, thus demonstrating their immense technological and military superiority, but which have never caused harm to civilians or property. Only in rare cases have they caused casualties. But such events were caused by the stubbornness and arrogance of the military, who often got too close to these vehicles, despite having been previously warned not to do so. Many of these civilian sightings are certainly fakes, but many others have no logical or scientific explanation. Flying objects that perform maneuvers that cannot be replicated by any existing technology today, that emerge from or dive into the seas, or even enter and exit volcanoes. Many spokespersons of the so-called science still continue to deny their existence. They continue to deny that such vehicles are of extraterrestrial origin. But if the military, and today also the intelligence agencies of various governments, tell us that these are not their own. How can we deny something so evident?
These are not U.S. military drones. Again, this is being investigated by local law enforcement. What our initial assessment here is that these are not drones or activities coming from a foreign entity or adversary.
Objects of different shapes, cigar-shaped, flat, triangular, or like the egg-shaped ones of the Apunians from the planet Apu. Do you remember what the Pope saw? Or like the one that police officer Lonnie Zamora saw in 1964 in Socorro, New Mexico? Or the one reported by Vlado Kapitanovich, who encountered members of the Apu civilization in the Peruvian Andes? Or like the one photographed by 14-year-old Ronnie Hill on July 21, 1967, in Pamlico County, North Carolina, with his Polaroid. So, by connecting all these testimonies, we could assert that the video released on January 15, 2025, by the newspaper News Nation and leaked by the pilot Jake Barber, who was flying the helicopter, is genuine. Just like the huge number of recent sightings in the United States, classified as drones, a generic term used to describe unmanned aircraft. Do you remember the words of Pope Roncalli's prophecy?
The lights in the sky will be red, blue, green, fast. They will increase. Someone is coming from afar and wants to meet the men of the earth.
But as if the evidence presented so far weren't enough, there is also more coming from a discovery made recently. Discovered in the Peruvian desert between Palpa and Nazca, in a cave, these mummies have been preserved to the present day thanks to the drying effect of the diatomaceous earth found in large quantities in the cave. These bodies were initially labeled as fakes, dolls made from the bones of various animals. And this was the news that stood out the most in recent years across the web, along with the poorly scientific reports by various popularizers who claimed that the famous researcher Jaime Maussan, who introduced these bodies to the public and displayed them in 2023 at a hearing in the Mexican parliament, had never shown a shred of proof of their authenticity. But such news, like all mainstream reports, was, to put it politely, highly biased. Indeed, a simple little web search would show that all the DNA analyses, CT scans, X-rays, tomographies, etc., conducted by various world-renowned institutes are publicly available. And the results of these studies were signed in 2023 by prominent researchers from various fields, in a final report published by the National University San Luis Gonzaga of ICA in Peru. Well, as usual, no one reported it. And on the contrary, even today people continue to slander without evidence, or with evidence that holds no scientific value, an important discovery, going so far as to smear prominent researchers, not only Peruvian and Mexican, but also American and Russian. As you've probably noticed, these bodies are tridactyl with 3 fingers and have a humanoid structure. In one of them in particular, likely a female, fertilized eggs were even found, containing developing offspring inside. But without going into too much detail, what are these bodies and what would they represent? They are genuine humanoid biological bodies, thus not human, dated to around 1700 years ago, equipped with bones, tendons, skin, and organs. Ranging in height from 60 centimeters to 1.6 meters, they walked and interacted in that Peruvian territory with the Paracas culture earlier and the Nazca culture later. From the study of their DNA, it emerged that they are similar to us only by about 30%, a value that varies from body to body. while of the remaining 70%, around 14% is of bacterial origin, likely the result of contamination, and the remaining 56% does not appear to be of terrestrial origin. This means it is different from any living being known to date. Some of these bodies are hybrids at various stages and can be classified as humanoid, insectoid, and reptiloid, and they have now been confirmed to be authentic and real bodies. Anyone who still says today that they're dolls or fakes, we believe doesn't even know what they're talking about. Obviously, scholars have not yet officially expressed themselves about their origin. However, they could be of alien origin, given the DNA analysis cited earlier, though other hypotheses are also being considered. What is certain is that they are not human and that they possessed knowledge, including chemical knowledge, far more advanced than the populations of their time. The metal plates found on the bodies are made of materials unknown and unworkable at that time. And if that weren't enough, we've already covered the subject of crop circles or crop glyphs, and have already shown their authenticity and how to tell the real ones from the fakes. Among these glyphs, however, there is one that reveals who the makers of such designs in the wheat fields are, as if it were a response to the many lies spread about these creations. It is obviously impossible, in a single night, to create such a large, complex, and precise figure, even in its meaning.
Beware of bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. Be assured that there is good out there. We are against deception. The conduit is closing.
Meaning that we have been given more time for your awakening and for those who work to spread truth and peace. They are here and have always been here for us, and the time of lies and suffering is about to end with the ultimate revelation of the great encounter with the Lords of Space, followed by the return of the Son of Man as judge. He will judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end. The so-called extraterrestrial civilizations have always been here and closer than we think, and if humanity has made it to the present day, it is also thanks to their interventions and guidance. We therefore believe that the evidence now may be enough to silence, and in some cases discredit, all those pseudo-spokespeople of science and so-called researchers who, until yesterday, kept parroting others' statements, trying to fool people with their high-sounding titles. We hope you've finally realized that those who, until yesterday, denied the visit of our celestial brothers and often the very existence of extraterrestrial civilizations, those who dismissed sightings as mere pareidolia, who denied the recovery of flying discs, who practically denied everything about this topic, are now, with the testimonies heard at the beginning of the video, blatantly telling us that they have always been lying, knowing full well they were lying. But as always, no one will ever say, mea culpa. No one will ever say, I apologize, I was wrong. You see, with all the evidence gathered over the last century, it is today practically impossible to say that extraterrestrial civilizations do not exist, or that they exist somewhere but cannot reach us, or have no interest in civilizations less evolved than their own, thinking they are as selfish as we are. And these, unfortunately, are the jokes that still circulate in some newspapers and media outlets and still come out from the mouths of scientific spokespeople, now in decline, and who see their lies crumble day by day under the weight of the truth, unyielding bearers of lies and deception. If you haven't realized it yet, all the topics we have discussed so far converge into one single great revelation. An entire cosmos that, with its multiple dimensions, is an expression of a God whom we still don't fully understand, but who radiates love and order. A Father, an expression of the creative idea and the builder of our skies and our earths. A Mother, the creator of countless forms of life, that she loves infinitely, and who, incarnating in the Virgin Mary, gave birth to the Son of Man, a Son, only begotten, and bearer of the Christic values and the teachings of the Father, a cosmos, a sun, a planet, a man, all of whom give everything and are order and justice, just as life and the way, while we, beings near the end of the third dimension, and made of 3 parts of matter and 1 part of astral, are still immature and ungrateful children who continue to need to experiment in duality. Spirits, connected to a body through our souls, to whom a kingdom has been entrusted, which, instead of protecting, we continually try to destroy. Children who, instead of loving one another as brothers and sharing what is given to them, simply try to cheat each other, becoming serial hoarders and seeking only earthly and temporary stimuli and pleasures. Spirits who, for millennia, have yet to understand how to evolve, persevering in the greatest mistake of all, pride.
I am the chosen one. Somebody had to do it.
But the time of the harvest has come, and is testified by the ever more tangible signs announcing the contact with beings of the 4th, 5th, and 6th dimensions, who were the angels of yesterday, and whom we now call extraterrestrials. The heavenly militias who will descend from the sky with Jesus, who will return to judge in the name of his Father and ours, the spirits of the living and the dead. The most recent sign, which anticipates the encounter with our brothers from space, is the so-called Sphere of Booga. One of those ancient flying spheres, often filmed all over the world and given by the brothers from space to the civilian population, is today the subject of study by the University of Mexico and by other researchers who have come from all over the world. And, well, such examinations have already provided quite a few confirmations. But more confirmations of its authenticity and antiquity come from recent discoveries near Tula in Mexico, where stone spheres with very similar carvings were uncovered by independent researchers. Just like the famous stones of Aztlan, which, besides depicting aliens and spaceships, contain representations unmistakably similar to the contents of the Booga sphere. But we'll maybe talk about the flying spheres in a future video. All these are signs that, for those who are able to see, testify that he, Jesus, will return to gather and raise the chosen children and cast the children of perdition into the fire, already selected by the legions of the great tempter and deceiver, Lucifer. A task, this one, assigned to him by the Father as a form of redemption for the great sin committed. Here, as Jesus himself explained, the parable of the weeds.
The harvest is the end of the world, and the harvesters are the angels. Just as the weeds are sorted out and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the world. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will remove from his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. And the angels will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine, like the sun, in their Father's kingdom. Anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand.
To those who still think and say, after millennia, that these are just fairy tales and nonsense, we would like to give a final warning at the behest of the Holy Mother.
You, my children, who listen but do not believe or try to understand, you have had time to redeem yourselves and are wasting it in the illusion of material things. You have received life, and you use it for the ephemeral. You have received the truth, and you have mocked it. The path was marked for you, but you have never walked it. I granted you more time by stopping the arm of my Son, and the Father's beloved children were sent to you. But, once again, you preferred the tempter's flattery. Open yourselves to the truth. I implore you, do not close your hearts to it. Your time will be short. Do not allow deception to take root in you. Only in this way I'll be able to lead you on the path of love, which is the only path that leads to my Son.
Obviously, you are free to choose your path and therefore your destiny, as you have always done, and as you have always been granted for the love of the Father. But now, as was promised to you, you have one more tool, the truth, all of it, offered by the Father in His infinite goodness. Do not waste it, for this will be your last opportunity to evolve. As of today, with the end of times now near, there will be no more reincarnations, no more second chances for anyone. The alternatives? As with the duality of this dimension, there will be only two: to raise your frequency by evolving, or face the second death. To fully and consciously embrace the Christic message, or return to the lower dimensions where you will lose the ego sum for millions of years, yet remain conscious of who you were and what you could have become. Therefore, embrace these revelations and make these words your own, because this is truth. This is justice.
Can you talk to me? Can you hear me? Jesus loves me. Oh, you know Jesus. You know Jesus. Jesus is awesome, isn't he? Yes, he is. God is good.
If you want to learn more, read the full article on our website. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss out on all the updates about the latest revealed truths.